Hello and welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Aaron Porras, and coming up in today's newscast, after 2 weeks since their escape, all 6 of the Palestinian prison fugitives recaptured by Israeli forces. Meanwhile, Israel and the EU sign a new COVID travel agreement as Jerusalem defends its latest booster shot campaign. And finally, with the holiday of Sukkot ahead, the nation coming together over the weekend to celebrate Yom Kippur, the holiest day in the Hebrew calendar. The search is over. All 6 escapees from the Gilboa prison now reunited with Israeli security forces. And Prime Minister Naftali Bennett among the many hailing the sophisticated and impressive manhunt operations.
הלילה נסגר מעגל, נעצרו 2 המחבלים האחרונים שברחו מכלא גלבוע לפני שבועיים. 2 המחבלים נכנעו ויצאו החוצה ללא תגובה באש.
After nearly 2 weeks in the wind, the final pair of runaways from Israel's Gilboa prison, Iham Kamamji and Munadel Infayat, recaptured in the West Bank city of Jenin. The other 4 prisoners likewise arrested in pairs in Nazareth, Israel, last weekend. But the final 2, members of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad terror group, were located in a house in eastern Jenin and were apprehended, along with 2 other men who were aiding them. According to intel reports, Kamamji and Infayat had been skipping from one safe house to the next for several days. The IDF, Israel Police, and ISA, however, hitting hard with a complex mission Saturday night. Police Commissioner Kobi Shabtai confirming that forces prepared for several days before getting the final signal to move in for the raid. And in fact, as part of the operation, Public Security Minister Omer Bar-Lev even misleading the Israeli public by saying in a televised interview Saturday night that at least one of the fugitives was believed still in Israel, when the IDF already knew that both were together in Jenin. This was a ploy to lull the suspects into a false sense of security after learning that they may have been using radios to keep tabs on the search efforts. Of course, that said, Bar-Lev also adding that the battle not yet over. Kamamji and Infayat only just now handed over for interrogation, and in the coming days, the government set to open a commission of inquiry into the escape itself. Prime Minister Bennett having already condemned the jailbreak as a wake-up call for the nation.
חלק ממערכות המדינה התנוונו בשנים האחרונות וצריכות לעבור תהליכים של תיקון, של ייעול, של חתירה למצוינות. את מה שהתקלקל אפשר לתקן.
Joining us now with more on the operation to recapture the final 2 Palestinian prison fugitives, former head of strategic planning for the IDF Central Command, Colonel Reserves, Dr. Danny Tirza. Dr. Tirza, thank you so much for being with us. Now, can you walk me through this operation? You know, what did it entail, some of the details? How was it planned? How was it performed?
Well, thank you. The first thing is to have the cooperation between all our forces on the ground. The Secret Service, the IDF, the police, and even the civil administration. They are all working together in one control room, talking in the same language, making the operation from the ground and from the technical units that help the Secret Service to work, and all together they're making one control room, as you can see in the picture, and in that control room, all the information is coming to one place and in the same language. At the moment that we are getting the right information about the place that these people are, we have, first of all, to see that we have the forces to do the operation as fast as we can and without people that will be harmed, not from the Palestinian side and of course not from our forces. So the special unit of the police that is called the Yamam, it's the anti-terror unit that they know how to work in very, very sharp, what we call strategic, we're calling it surgical way. We are coming inside the Palestinian area, isolating the houses that we think that the terrorists are there, and be sure that no one can get in, no one can get out. After we isolate the place, we call the people that are inside. Probably they are, they are not waiting for us there. And we have to be sure that we are protected when we are doing this operation and trying to get inside with dogs or with robots, not with soldiers. The first thing that we're trying to do is to do it without soldiers, just to do it from outside. And in this particular operation, it works very good, because when the terrorists understand that they are close and they cannot get out, and the alternative is that the army is going to blow up the building and they will be killed. One of them called his father and he said that he's ready to give up, and that's the right thing and the best thing that we can dream of.
So I want to. So I want to interject here because actually part of this operation, as I understand it, this came up recently, was that Omer Bar-Lev, the security chief, deceived Israel in order to deceive the terrorists. This was seriously reminiscent of the attack on the metro of tunnels in Gaza, by the way, where they amassed troops on the border to trick the Hamas into the tunnel in order to destroy it. So here again, we see Israeli security officials willfully, knowingly deceiving the Israeli public in order to deceive Palestinian militants. Couldn't Bar-Lev have just said nothing? Was the deception necessary?
Yes, it was necessary, because otherwise the Palestinians will be around it and we cannot get to the place. The main idea was that the Palestinians would think that we are going to get inside the refugee camp, and you cannot do it unless you are really use your forces, using the media, using the public in the Israeli side, the Palestinian side, that everyone will believe that we are going to one place and really we're going to another place. And I think that was a very good idea. That's the way that the chief of staff of Israel, of the army, is using almost every time.
So just to continue on that, though, is that really, as you say, as you're suggesting, maybe the new face of the Israeli security modus operandi, where authorities feel comfortable lying to the public because the ends justify the means?
It's not lying, it's cheating in a way, but it's not a lying. You don't have to tell everything, but you have to make the picture. And if you are making the right picture for the public, it works. And as you can see here, it works very good, because they were surprised. As you know, Jenin is not a small town, and everyone thought that we are going to the west side, and really these special forces went to the east side, and they succeeded to get to the house without fighting any Palestinian forces on the ground.
Wow. All right, Colonel Dr. Danny Tilta, thank you so much for joining us and sharing some of your insights on this operation with us.
Thank you. Bye.
Now, in related news, the recapture of all 6 Palestinian fugitives from the Israeli Gilboa prison, sending shockwaves through the Palestinian public. On social media, many Palestinians initially even refusing to believe the reports, saying that the 2 who were arrested were simply other people with similar names. And once there was no doubt, the narrative shifting again to photoshopping smiles onto prisoners' faces and adopting spoons as a symbol of resistance. Here to discuss, founder and director of Palestinian Media Watch, Itamar Marcus. Itamar, it's a pleasure to have you back with us. Thank you so much. Now, generally speaking, to start, how is the narrative or the legend around these fugitives shifting?
Well, the Palestinian population and the Palestinian Authority initially was so euphoric, and they were convinced that this was going to be a watershed moment for them, and they would become symbols forever of the resistance of defeating the great Israeli prison, the Gilboa prison. When they arrested the first group was the first shock, and now this is the second shock. So what's happening now is a rewriting of what happened. It wasn't the staying free that was important. Now they're saying the important thing was that they were able to get out even for a short time. You have to understand that for the Palestinian Authority, they're constantly rewriting narratives, rewriting history, anything to make the Palestinian population proud of themselves, to feel themselves heroic. Everything is wonderful, everything is great, aside from the suffering from Israel. But aside from that, everything they can do is heroic. So when they're caught now, they have to change the narrative. They can't talk about a failure. They can't say, okay, it was a failed escape attempt. No, it was a successful escape attempt, and we showed the Israelis that nothing is too tough to keep us behind bars. The fact that they went back to prison is not so important. The important thing. So that's the rewriting of the narrative. And I'll say this is a pattern. Whenever something bad happens, it's repackaged as something positive based on the new circumstances.
All right, well, we see a lot of spoons popping up online and in the media as a symbol for how, with a little determination, something so simple and harmless could be used to escape something so powerful like an Israeli prison. What do you make of this new symbol, as it falls in line with the narrative that you just discussed? Will it inspire the Palestinian masses as it's intended to, or will it maybe blow over with the news cycle?
Well, because it ended up that they were arrested, I think it eventually is going to disappear. It's not going to last forever. What is interesting, though, is that there's a new twist, and that some of the Palestinian leaders are talking about that when there will be a prisoner exchange, these people will be at the top of the list. They're going to be the first ones to be, that they're going to demand from Israel in the prisoner exchange. So they're not willing to say that what they didn't have any positive results. They're saying now that it had positive results, at least for them. They're going to eventually be released. And in fact, one of the statements from an Islamic Jihad leader was, we have Israeli prisoners, and we can, I think, so the implication is they're now going to use the Israeli prisoners that they have as bargaining chips for the release of these 6 people.
All right, so another surprise for many Palestinians was actually the lack of aid provided to the escapees from the Israeli Arab or Israeli Palestinian population. Has anything changed since the supposed rift was first torn open with the first couple of arrests? We're seeing the rewriting of history as it's happening. The Palestinian Authority official statements are that don't believe the lies of the Israeli public. They're not going to allow their population to feel that Israeli Arabs were involved in turning them in and didn't help them. Of course, the people have their own ways of getting the information, and the information will get out there. But for the Palestinian Authority, their message is the Palestinian people are united within the occupied 1948 territories, meaning Israel, and when the more recently occupied territories in 67, they're all united. They're one people. They'll all help each other. So don't believe the Israeli lies that the Arabs of 48, again, the Israeli Arabs, didn't help them. All right, now, final thing, as I discussed a little bit earlier, a lot of effort was put in place by the Palestinians to protect the city of Jenin, where the arrest occurred, from the IDF, the Izz ad-Din al-Qassam brigades. Compared the city to the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and they warned the IDF from entering. There's been daily gunfire and violence on behalf of the Islamic Jihad targeting Israeli checkpoints. Is the Palestinian public surprised that the IDF arrest raid was so quick and relatively nonviolent?
Again, there won't be an official statement about this, but I'm sure there was surprise. Primarily disappointment, but I'm sure there was surprise. They were hoping that there would be a major gun battle, and then they could have some heroic martyrs, which would then possibly trigger more violence. It sort of went down with a puff, and it was like nothing. So I'm sure there's tremendous disappointment in the Palestinian street, especially since it was built up that there's going to be this major event. But like I said, what's interesting is that in the Palestinian media, the official media, they're already changing the topics that they're talking about. Now they're, so that, in other words, this didn't really work out as good as they wanted, so they're not going to harp on this. So they went to the next topic. So there have been a number of articles already about the Sabra and Shatila massacre. This is around the anniversary of the Sabra and Shatila massacre. There was an article today blaming Israel for the massacre. Israel did the massacre. In other words, if that topic has worn out and isn't effective anymore, okay, so we'll pick up the next topic, the cruel Israelis who massacred. In fact, today's article had an incredible statistic or lie that it was 5,000 Palestinians were killed in Sabra and Shatila, and it was done by Israeli forces. So you have two, total lies there. The number was probably in the hundreds. And Israel, of course, had nothing to do with killing of anyone. There was possibly negligence on Israel's part. So again, the Palestinian official media and the Palestinian leadership is not going to harp on this failure. They'll immediately go to new topics and continue to promote their messages, both victimhood, Israelis are killing us, as well as heroism on the part of Palestinians, whatever the next topic may be.
All right. Itamar Marcus, thank you so much for joining us.
You're very welcome.
Moving on, just in time for the holidays, the EU and Israel signing a reciprocal tourism agreement. And the deal, where Israel joins the EU's digital COVID certificate program, would allow for both Israel and the EU member states to recognize travelers' COVID vaccine certificates. Hopefully, this will lead to a returning boon of international tourism. Meanwhile, the news coming several weeks into Israel's COVID booster shot program, which already showing some signs of early success. An early study showing that the boosters increase immunity by up to 10 times. And both Prime Minister Naftali Bennett and Head of Public Health Services, Dr. Sharon Alroy-Price, lauding the campaign, suggesting that the U.S. will soon follow suit. Of course, not everyone is agreeing.
The assessment from Israel on the effectiveness and safety of boosters is based on very limited follow-up, just a matter of weeks or maybe a month at the most. So we really don't know from those data really how effective boosters are or how safe they are. And I would like to point out that the epidemic in Israel is very concerning. It is not going down. In fact, it's increasing even after the boosters were rolled out.
So are the boosters useful, useless, necessary? With me to answer is head of the immunotherapy lab at Bar-Ilan University, Professor Cyril Cohen. Professor Cohen, thanks so much for being with us again. Now, first off, let's start with the claim of efficacy. Early studies published in the New England Journal of Medicine are saying that the boosters enhance immunity by 10 times. But we just heard from Dr. Longini that there's not enough data yet. So which is it?
Hello. What we can just say is look at the data, and we have data because Israel has been vaccinating with more than 2 months for more than 2 months using, I would say, that booster shot for originally people that were immunosuppressed, starting from the end of July. So it's almost 2 months or so. We are vaccinating people over the age of 60-year-old. And what we can see today with the data is that if you are above the age of 60 and you look at the people that are vaccinated, unvaccinated, or vaccinated with a booster shot, what you can clearly see is that if you are vaccinated with the 2 doses, the chances to get into severe condition are 4 times less than if you're not vaccinated. And if you got your booster shot, the chances are 40 times, 40, less than if you are unvaccinated. Therefore, we do believe, I think it's clear-cut. It's not only our assessment, this is also the reason why the FDA decided to go on with a booster shot for 65-year-old plus. The data from Israel is really showing the efficacy, effectiveness of that booster shot for people over the age of 60.
All right, so another concern was the societal impact, however, of inoculating millions of people again and again before vaccinating parts of the globe where the pandemic may still be out of control. And this has actually been an argument that's been taken by the WHO as well. So are we going about this the right way? Has Israel's vaccine campaign been too focused on short-term gains at the expense of other countries or even the global community?
I think that the case of Israel is kind of very special. And let me phrase it like that, True, I agree with the WHO and other, I would say, instances, our other entities that would claim that we need also to distribute vaccines to other places around the world, because at the end of the day, it's a global fight. And the more people remain unvaccinated, the more chances they will be actually infected and the more variants we will see. So it's really a global fight. But on the other hand, I have to tell you that a small country like Israel is not really making the difference, especially that I think, and that was a perfect example last Friday, the world is relying on the data from Israel. So by, administering this booster shot, here in Israel, I think that we are also providing the whole world with data that is not available so far. And therefore, I think that in our case, there is, to some extent, a reason to have a booster shot here in Israel. But I would agree. And what I would recommend to do, people can do that, is you can also, give some money to the COVAX program if you really want to help and participate. Israel is participating in this program so that more doses of vaccine can be distributed around the world.
All right, Professor Cyril Cohen, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Now, for our final item tonight, we get reflective and repentant with the holiest day of the Hebrew year. Israelis and Jews around the globe celebrating Yom Kippur, or the Day of Atonement, over the weekend.
We come in here every year at that time. This is like 3 days before Yom Kippur. We are launching a special traditional custom that we are coming here to the sea, to the beach, and we are throwing the sins to the sea. This is a symbolic act. We are showing to the Lord that we are becoming a better person because we are throwing the sins to the sea.
Millions of Jews preparing for the Yom Kippur high holiday last week, asking for forgiveness, donating to charity, confessing sins, and otherwise looking to purify themselves ahead of the annual 25-hour fast and extended prayer services. The holiday bringing with it a unique quiet as the typically bustling city streets fade into silent introspection. Nearly all drivers across the nation leaving their cars in the parking lot, and businesses and services all likewise grinding to a halt from Wednesday night to Thursday night, when the shofar is blown and the fast is finally broken. Far from the lockdowns that accompanied last year's Yom Kippur holiday, however, this year's observance returning mostly back to normal. Israelis from all walks of life, mostly children and particularly from the secular and non-Jewish demographics, taking to the streets with their scooters, bikes, and dogs without fear of being hit by the usual traffic, even on major highways or in crowded cities like Tel Aviv. And of course, with one holiday done, the next already up in rotation. Sukkot, aka the Feast of Booths, aka the Feast of Tabernacles, setting in Monday evening. Unlike Yom Kippur, though, which is a solemn and serious event, the week of Sukkot is a bit more lively. Marked by living in temporary dwellings and exposing oneself to the elements, Sukkot commemorates the Jews' biblical journey from Egypt to the Promised Land, and it's a holiday of joy and happiness. And to that end, without lockdowns looming overhead, the typical exhibitions, shows, concerts, and festivals seen during the week of Sukkot are back in full force. All one needs to attend is a mask and a green pass. Now let's take a look at the weather forecast. The gorgeous and slightly cooler weather from last week waning slightly, giving way to what looks like another minor heat wave. Clear and sunny skies overhead. The average low tonight hovering around 70 degrees Fahrenheit or 21 degrees Celsius. And then the average high tomorrow rising to upwards of 91 or 33 degrees Celsius, with Eilat getting up to as high as 101 Fahrenheit or 38 Celsius. And now before we go, let's take a look at what's going viral here in Israel. Side of Israel you don't see. Foot chasing, race. Wow, that cop is booking it though. He's in full gear. Amazing. All right, that is it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.21 shekels for the American dollar and 2.51 shekels for the Canadian dollar. And finally, for the latest updates and news from ILTV, please like ILTV on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, as well as to our newsletter at ILTV.tv. I'm Aaron Porras. Chag Sukkot Sameach, and be well. Thank you so much for watching.